Hi, this is Bernie, your Uber elder. I'm here in Katati, waiting for some Uber requests to come through. And thinking about last night when I was listening to KQED, our local public radio station, airing a presentation at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco as part of a series they call Climate One. And they had on two scientists. And I want to talk about what the climate scientists in general are saying that I find wanting. Overall, I think the IPCC is too conservative, and it's been shown year after year that when they describe their worst case scenario, it turns out to be worse in reality than what they predict. And I guess that's understandable in that they're, as scientists, always wanting to be careful not to be alarmist. But I think it is time to be alarmist. And last night, one of the scientists who teaches at Stanford was making the point that he doesn't believe it's his job to interpret or give opinions. He's just there doing the research and giving the facts. And I get that. But if all scientists did that and none of them spoke out about what they're seeing in total, then we leave it up to reporters and the public in general to interpret that. And generally, we have a bias towards believing that this is going to be handled. In fact, one of the other scientists on the panel last night was talking about her efforts, which are about trying to get people to accept that climate change being man-made is real. Now, I think that's noble, but it's so elementary. I mean, I think the people that don't think climate change is real are in denial, and it's not really productive in my mind to spend a lot of time trying to convince them. But nevertheless, she thinks it's important, and she came to a belief that the key, it wasn't intelligence that had you either believing in man-made climate change or not. She believed, and her research showed, that it came down to what your political beliefs were prior to dealing with this question. And that if the science confirms your political beliefs, you believe it. And if it runs contrary to what you already believe, you tend to discount it. And that rings true. I definitely get that. And she felt that it was important not to bring fear into the equation, because the minute you raise the alarm about how bad it's getting year after year, that shuts people down. So she approaches it on a positive basis and felt that she was making progress because had actually done some research that whether she presented live to people like at a college campus or with the video that she produced, taking people's pulse about how they felt about climate change before and after, she felt that it was making progress. But progress to her was about more people coming to believe that humanity is responsible. Well, the first, and they did talk about humanity a lot. Now, the first issue I take with that is it's not all human beings. It's not our species. It's not humanity. It's our culture. It's our civilization. It's our industrial civilization that is causing the problem. It isn't all human beings. There are plenty of cultures. The indigenous cultures are not causing the problem. And the second part is that if you keep viewing climate change as the problem, then you're not digging deeper. And she talked in terms of, well, when we find a solution to this, or to come to a solution, to get this kind of behind us, which I think is also wishful thinking, because rather than seeing this as a huge predicament that we're all in, giving the notion that there is a solution. And in her mind, the solution included lots of things. And so she had, the discussion was questioned about, well, people who are vegan believe they're part of the solution, and they are. And people who believe in renewable energy is part of the solution, they are. And she was asked whether if we did all of these things, would that solve the problem? And she had trouble with the idea of, if personally we each do a little bit less air travel, eat a little less meat, use a little less fossil fuels, that would be sufficient. She agreed that that was a problem. So she didn't want to put on people this idea that we need to do less of everything, but she couched it in the form of, we need to be smart about it. And what it turned out to be smart about it was really taking the science to technology, where the technology allows us to continue the lifestyle. In fact, I'll switch now to the male scientist that was talking about, or he was asked about, is indeed climate change the one issue that tops all other issues? And he's been known to say, no, it doesn't. He saw the inequalities in our society, the various suffering and inequalities that exist on the planet as co-equal to the climate change problem. And to me, that's absurd. I mean, we're talking on the one hand about extinction, and on the other hand, continuing, heading towards extinction, but thinking that how we navigate that process and that it be more fair and just and equal is just as important as avoiding the extinction. They didn't use the word extinction because they never really brought it to that level. But in his book, there were lots of issues on the table, and climate change was just one of them. And I would have been fine with that if he were willing to dig deeper as to what is a root cause of the climate change and the injustices and the inequalities that we're seeing on the planet. But he didn't go there, and she didn't go there. In fact, she viewed herself as a Christian. So she did talk about how in the Bible there is this notion that we take care of each other, that we as humans are charged with the responsibility of taking care of everything, and that we're apart from the rest of the nature. So being in that belief system, in that paradigm, that humans are above all other species, to me is one reason that she was not able to come to a satisfactory response. One of the women asking a question afterwards talked about the urgency and how all of these, this talk was, in her mind, not nearly sufficient. But it was always couched as, yes, we've got to come up with the energy alternatives, not we need to live a low energy lifestyle. It was always that, in fact, she said that our fossil fuels have done a lot of good for us, in that they've allowed women to gain equality. They've allowed us to have a more just society, to recognize gay and LGBTQ lifestyles. And so she viewed fossil fuels as having given us that basis for thinking and political action that have achieved a lot. But again, those achievements, if we're wiped out as a species, in my book, are not long lasting and they're not meaningful. And she wanted to hold on to those things. And I get that. And she talked about going forward, not going backward, and actually used the term of not going back to a medieval existence. And I get that. As a woman, you don't want to go back to being second class. You don't want to deal with the problems of humans in societies that haven't gotten to a place of gender equality. But a diverse set of cultures that may not be fair to women in one place or may be preferential to women in another place or whatever was not thrown out there. It was always about what the civilization as a whole, now that we have an industrial civilization that can communicate across the globe, where do we go from here? And it was always like assuming that this industrial platform that we're on can be corrected to no longer damage the planet. And again, focused only on climate change. And it made me think that these climate scientists are doing a disservice to us. They're keeping us from actually digging deeper in our thinking, in our research, in our analysis. And I want scientific inquiry into what capitalism and industrialism is doing to contribute both to the climate and the ecosystem, loss of diversity, of biodiversity, and loss of cultural diversities, and viewing that those evolutionary preferences for survival of a species, which we know from science, with all the knowledge we have, I believe we have plenty of knowledge. What we're lacking is wisdom to apply that knowledge in a better way. And